Games, board games and rolling rides, it's what I'm talking about. Are rolling rides bad for the environment? Well, I'm not gonna shout. I, truth be told, don't really know. But I'll have a little ponder upon this show. I guess my stance is probably not. But listen more if you want to hear a take that's hot. Board are rolling rights bad for the environment? It's what I'm talking about. Are rolling rights bad for the environment? I'm not gonna shout. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. It is 10 a.m. UK time. Time for another Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether. So what I'm talking today is, are rolling rights bad for the environment? What do you think? I think not. And we'll have a quick rant. I'm not declaring to be an authority, but I do have some. I've developed a fair bit of knowledge. I've talked to lots of people about how environmental impact can be measured. I'll talk about why I think that they are not a bad thing. So before we get into that, let me quickly rush through some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. Well, my most recent highlight is that I did some drawings this morning. So here's a little creature. It's doing yo-yos. That's meant to be yo-yos. I don't know if it comes across. This is a creature on its head, although you could look at it this way and then it just looks really weird, but it is balancing on its head, well, on its hand. It's doing a handstand. This little creature doing a drum, and so I intentionally put its legs together to make it look like fish scales, like a tail. I'm trying to be cheeky. This one, which just has a bit of a wee scarf and is not quite facing the camera. And of course, I've got the ones from yesterday that I did. But I didn't do much else yesterday, but I did have a quick cycle out. I did get outside, so that was good. I did a good amount of exercise, and then trying to get stuff done, but somewhat failing, if I'm being honest. Hello, Timmy. How are you? I hope that you're generally well. And so, what are some of your recent highlights? In the meantime, let's talk about a brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? So, rolling rights. What is a rolling right and why is it brilliant? Okay, I guess, I should bring up my first thing. So, what is a rolling right? For those who don't know, a rolling right is it's a game where you roll dice and then you write. So sometimes you've got a wee pen, and sometimes you're writing numbers. Yahtzee is probably the most famous roll and write, where you take turns, you roll the dice, and you're like, oh, maybe I've got a high score, and then you keep rolling. Maybe you want to stop, your luck, but then you tick off little bits on boxes. And hello, Ian, it is lovely to see you. And I hope you're generally well. Please feel free to comment and contribute and ask questions. But yeah, roll and write is a game where you have some dice, you've got a bit of paper, and unless it's laminated, which I still count as a roll and write, that paper is used up. That's what I would count as roll and write, where that is the majority of the game. I would not count, for example, Ticket to Ride New York as a roll and write. Because Ticket to Ride New York, you've got a board, you've got pieces, and yes, you write your score on this little pad, and so there is writing involved, so there's still, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about games where the majority, although I might get into that tangentially, I'm also talking about flip and write, where you flip cards, and just games that are destructible. That's what we're talking about today. So firstly, why do people play it? Why is it a brilliant thing, little thing which is brilliant? So why do people love roll and write? Well, Suzanne Sheldon suggests that it's because people love making a mark. There's something satisfying about you make a mark on a bit of paper and there are no takesy backsies. You can use a pencil in Welcome to Dino World, and they kind of encourage that. But then there's a question of, is this not a good roll and write? And I say that as someone who works on it and as someone who has a lot of love for Alley Cat games, because I still have connections and I might be working on stuff for that studio. But it's about, once you've made a mark, you are making this mark, you are customizing this thing, and there's something almost inherently satisfying about, it's like, the other day, yesterday, when I was drawing bits, and then like when I was drawing one of these creatures, like I went through the pencil and that was stress-free, and then the first, I can't remember, where was the first one? I think I had there was a number 7, I thought. I thought there was a number 7. Have I lost? Here we go. So this was the first one that I drew, number 7, yesterday. So I drew it, and then I was like, okay, that's okay. Now I need to draw the pen. Oh, this is scary. There's no undos. There's nothing like that. But when you get your pen down and you make this mark, there's something inherently satisfying, saying, I am doing this. It is a permanent change. It's never going to go again. Yeah, absolutely. Yahtzee is the granddaddy of roll and writes, or Beetle Drive. Yeah, indeed. Like, that's an interesting one where you roll dice and then you draw it on your bit of paper. And that's an interesting one because you start off with a blank sheet of paper. For those who don't know, you need to roll different numbers or different combinations depending on the house rules that you play. This is more of a folk game where it's a way of essentially rolling dice until you have created your own character, and different results are kind of refer to different parts of the body. But anyway, roll and writes are a brilliant thing. Many people are enjoying it. Currently, there's a lot of people who enjoy roll and writes for the low interaction, for the fact that people can simultaneously play. Generally, they're simple. You know what's going on with them, and it's the joy of creating this thing that, wow, at the end we can see all the things that have been made. It's kind of like the joy of Carcassonne, where you've got the tiles spreading out, and at the end it's like, oh, we made a map that only we've made. It's like when you get to the end of Cartographers, it's like, oh, I made a map and this is my map. At the end of, I mean, it's not quite the same, but at the end of Ganz Schön Clever, you are, oh, these circles, they show my story through the game. It's not quite as visual, but it shows your story. And so that's what's brilliant about roll and write. Again, feel free to comment, ask questions from like, follow. So, is disposable stuff bad for the environment? Now, this is what I want to ask, and I'm going to say no. I am going to say that disposable stuff is not inherently bad for the environment. Like, toilet paper is not bad for the environment. I mean, sure, there isn't an actual need for toilet paper. We could be using, well, I've got to be frank with you. If I were to use a bidet, and the place where I used to live did have a bidet, it was very fancy, and I would sit down and then I would wash my behind, and then after that I would use a few bits of toilet paper just to dry it off. I think there needs to be some system of drying it off. Otherwise, you've got dripping water down. But like that, look, whatever we're doing, we are using up something. If you are cleaning dishes, I mean, obviously, disposing of that tiny bits of washing up liquid is better for the environment than disposing of an entire plate. Paper plates are worse for the environment. I think that's basically the generally agreed thing than washing up your plates. And even if whether you're using a little bit of washing up liquid and washing up it in a sink, or whether you're using a bit of dishwasher tablets, like the production of those things and the energy for heating up the water to wash it is less than the energy for making a paper plate or some sort of disposable plate. Not to mention, you've got to think about the cycle. Where does that plate go? If it's paper, then there's a limit to what you can do on that. For example, you can't use paper bowls for. But my point is, in life, we are going to dispose of things. True story. I once got into this state where I felt guilty every time I was drawing on paper because it would feel like whatever I'm doing, I am drawing on this paper, and this is like this paper, it has so much potential, and then I'm using up the ink, but that's not a big deal. It can be recycled. Uh, When we think about what is bad for the environment, I think there's the things we need to think about is how was it produced? How did it get to us? And what will happen after we use it? These are basically the things we need to think about. So plastics, they need oils and, which is quite expensive in terms of carbon units. It's like it can be quite expensive to produce them. My understanding is that paper, if it's done from, you know, the proper FSC certified places, is going to be generally fine. And something like a pen, well, there's a lot of plastics in here, there are inks, this is not great for the environment. And then at that point, we need to decide, is it worth it? Is it worth it for me to be buying? I genuinely go through boxes of these. I buy maybe 50 at a time, and then that lasts me a year or so, and because then I get them on special deals. But yeah, and hello, River Dusty, thank you for joining the stream, who says, I'm a big fan of using hemp products. They're 99% biodegradable and you get everything from toilet paper to clothing. Interesting. Paper pulped remains of murdered trees, sure. But again, with the FSC certified stuff, FSC certified means that this is not from forests that have then been murdered just for the sake of making these things. This is land that would otherwise, and then we are making new trees for the sake of turning them into paper. So FSC certified Forest Standards Commission is a way to make sure that it's generally okay. And yeah, this is a fair point when you're talking about paper plates and again the bleach paper. But the point isn't that anything can be completely without fault. The question was, are rolling rights bad for the environment? And I am comparing them to board games in general. Now, I tend to laminate, says Ian, and that brings me to my next question. Like, is laminated stuff better? Because, of course, laminated stuff means that, hey, you don't need to throw away the paper. And that might feel better to you. But then, I would argue that actually laminating is probably worse. I would argue that how many times are you playing this? How many sheets of paper would you use? Because let's say you play it 20 times with 4 players. That's 80 sheets. That's a lot more times than most gamers would play a game. And someone who's actually decided to laminate that stuff, well, and the truth is that most board games on average get played less than a couple of times. If you look at the majority of board games, and this is incredibly sad, is that the majority of board games do not get played at all, especially when you consider all the, like monopolies and everything. So I think that laminated stuff is not inherently better because, again, you've got the energy that it takes to laminate it. the plastic itself that you need to laminate the thing, now you have to use special inks for. That's probably not a great point, but you might have to buy special pens that you didn't have to have beforehand. And yeah, this plastic, after you've used it, where's it going to go? So instead of having 80 sheets of paper for 20 games, then you have, 4 bits of laminate, and that plastic is going to end up going somewhere. Sure, we might. And so a few sheets of paper, laminate, which is better? I would argue that the few sheets of paper is probably better because, again, given the FSC, so the big issue becomes the shipping. So with the shipping, then we have to ask the questions. What needs to come in the box? Are people willing to buy just a bunch of sheets of paper? Would people be willing to pay money for that? I mean, people did pay money for dice and ink, although that kind of folded, so maybe it's not the best example. People did pay a lot of money for voyages where they print it at home. And it's, again, really hard to measure the energy impact, the environmental impact of printing it at home or going somewhere else to get it printed. It means that, hey, it might be less efficiently printed, but it means that now you don't have to do all the transportation costs because all you're transporting are some digital files, which are a lot cheaper. I mean, it's better for the environment. So, hello, Josie. It is lovely to see you, and I will go in some weird order with all the comments. Josie says, I suppose if it's printed paper, is this something you have as a special pad, or can you just use plain paper? I mean, no one wants to draw that grid. I mean, roll and writes kind of revels, especially nowadays, especially if you look at Three Sisters, which is all about planting methods, where you've got like lots of different icons that you can tick off. Voyages, like who's going to actually take the time to draw that, all those hexagons? Hexagons are hard to draw, and if I were to draw them, they wouldn't look as good. I mean, I want them in like a faint grey so that when I make the marks, and like, so yeah, it's always, I think we can, although there have been some games that use blank paper, like my own alphabetical, it can use blank paper, micro muckle, mini muckle, then, they can use blank paper, but again, this is, I think it has to be pre-printed. River Dusty says, for D&D games, we keep our character stats digital. We still use board and dice for actual gameplay, but it does minimize the mess and the waste. So the point being that then they don't need to write on bits of paper that get thrown away. But Josie raises a point. Well, what about the energy consumption? Doesn't New York have an island made almost entirely of dirty diapers? That might be true. Marble dice instead of plastic dice, suggests River Dusty. Not serious. Winky face. And Ian feels all the feels of having games that are not used. So Josie says, with digital, you have to consider the size of the files, the size of the server too, as this all takes electricity and other resources. Yes, you have to be, how do you find that electricity? And that's the thing, like, doing this sort of, here's the truth. I don't think that roll and writes are inherently worse for the environment than a typical board game, but I'm not sure. And this gets into the whole, how do we measure the impact? Again, with traditional distribution, you might think, okay, you've got the production, you've got the transportation, and then you've got the, okay, how does it biodegrade, or what happens to it afterwards? And again, like I said at the start of the show, toilet paper, I don't think we should be feeling guilty about using toilet paper because it's fine. But then something like cotton buds, where they've got that little plastic thing, like that doesn't feel great. And I try to, if I'm cleaning my ears, do like get a little bit of like for the outside. I use a little bit of toilet paper and I scoop it around and have something in there. I do still use cotton buds, but they last me like, I mean, a year. But like again, everything that we use, it's like I'm not saying that I'm free of guilt. No one is, and I think that's the ultimate thing to be, um, yeah, mindful of what you do. So the production, what resources are going into this? What energy is going to be consumed? What what materials are being used? Is the paper from somewhere where it's sustainably made? Is the paper, are we cutting down old forests in order to do this? And yeah, then the transportation. This is where, frankly, um, something where it's UK only kind of makes sense. And when people are buying my games for 10 quid when they're based in America, then, obviously I'm happy to take their money. But the truth is that maybe people, and again, this is something where bigger companies should be doing more than they currently are, in my opinion. What? Sorry, that's really weird. Ian says the only thing you should insert in your ear is your elbow. How does that even? Anyway, and River Dusty says no to cotton buds, yes to finger wraps and toilet paper. But anyway, so getting back on the topic, so yeah, the transportation. This is like a really big thing, and yep, of course, big companies prioritize profit. They have to legally by American law, which is incredibly messed up. But the transportation, like the bigger boxes that look great on the shelf, that's terrible for the environment. Let's have more, little boxes that are, the right size. And like Oink. Oink is a really solid example of a company that manages to charge a sizable amount for their boxes, even though they are tiny. And then people actually learn that these games have value. Button Shy is really interesting because, again, they are making tiny 18 card games, but then they're charging actually quite a fair bit for it. Like, they charge way more than I charge for my stuff. And yeah, the Splendor box, like, that is ridiculous. Like, the amount of, and this is another thing, like, I would almost say that the okay, I know that you're I don't know how you consider your affiliation with Asmodee, like if you're, but yeah, to be fair, you were the one who brought it up. Like, Splendor, in my opinion, is a fine game. I played it to a whole bunch over Board Game Arena when I was sick, and I've not played Board Game Arena since like January. But like, anyway, so Splendor is fine, but I would argue that the only reason it's done well is because of the tactility of these great big poker chips. It's an enjoyable game to play just because of these great big chips. And I'm not sure that that's a great situation, that we should be making games that are only satisfying because of their poker chips. And when you've got these great big stonking poker chips that are made of plastic, then what do you do? Rather than put them, frankly, it could probably fit in a box about this size, but instead you've got a box about this size, which is, again, yes, ridiculous. Okay, maybe not quite this size, maybe double this size, but instead it's about 8 times. And yeah, 100%. Yes, there should not be dead air because that adds costs. Like when you're shipping things, so who was it who came on? Ross Atkin. So if you watch my show at the start of it, the first hour for my 600th show, Ross Atkin, we ended up talking quite a bit about the environment. Ross Atkin does a lot of that. I'd love to have them on. I should actually reach out to them and ask them to come back on. But they were talking about, yes, ultimately, as board game designers, one thing we can do is try to get the weight down, because that's going to impact the shipping. But if you do it by plane or train or lorry, actually, when you do shipping by lorry, apparently it is weight. That's the main thing, rather than volume, which I did not realize. I assumed that by lorry it would be the volume that's the main thing, but it is the weight that impacts the amount of fuel needed to deliver. But of course, most of the journey is in big ships where the primary impact is on the volume. And so, yes, if you've got big boxes, then that's going to be more costly to ship off. But because of the fact that fuel is maybe underpriced in today's global economy, you could say that it's less of a price difference for the publisher than compared to the impact on the environment that it has. And so, yes, box size is massive. And then we have to think about how it gets after we use it. Are these inks recyclable? Can we put these inks into the recycling? Because paper is actually generally okay in this situation. And Dusty talks about plastic coated stuff. Quite often cards have plastic coating. That means that they can't be recycled. And so maybe flip and writes are not that great. But is the paper the main impact? I would say no. That's my personal viewpoint. I would love to have more people talking about this. And if you would like to come on to the show, or if someone's watching this and would like to come on to the show to discuss more, then please do so. If you consider that if you feel like you've got some sort of expertise, or if you've just got an opinion and you want to share it. Josie says, I know companies want the boxes to be visible, but maybe marketing needs to be rethought rather than relying on visibility on a shelf. From a collector perspective, smaller boxes means I can own more games. Sure, but from a publisher perspective, if I can get you to buy my game and my game is yay big, then there's frankly more chance of you actually playing said game. And if it's in a board game cafe, more people will play it. More people play it, more people buy it. On your shelf, more visibility. More visibility, more people asking you, hey, what's that game? And then you've got the weird things like, yeah, I'm not going to get into them because I can't talk about the weird things without me calling out specific games. Morning, Alex. I hope that you are generally well. So, yes. My question of the day is to turn it over to you. What do you think about roll and writes? Do you think that roll and writes are inherently worse for the environment than a typical board game? I mean, yeah, my conclusion, based on the materials used, is probably not. But, I mean, yeah. Alex says, I'm not only generally well, I'm also corporally well and majorly well. Excellent. Fantastic. And Josie says, I disagree. If it's smaller, I'm more likely to take it out of the house and play it, as it's easier to put in my bag. That's a good point. But are you representative of the majority of a publisher's audience? Like, if you look at the biggest demographic, like where do they play games? Is it going to be in pubs? Like hobbyists play games in pubs. Hobbyists play games in the park. Hobbyists take games on journeys. But most people, they have a big collection that's maybe like 10 games, and then they play it maybe a couple of times a year at most. And I appreciate you saying that. So my question of the day, I've answered my opinion. Are rolling rights bad for the environment? And I am very happy for my opinion to be changed. I would love for someone to come on with some expert things, but what do you think? Do you think they are? Um, Alex says, I'm sort of the opinion that compared with all the wide variety of industries that promote the use of single-use plastics and board games, where the components are used multiple times, has a pretty insignificant impact on the environment. We are talking about single-use board games, namely roll and rights. Are roll and rights worse for the environment than non-roll and rights games? So if you imagine, let's say, no thanks, just that's the first game that came to my head. I didn't want it to be a, you know, just a deck of cards, and so I couldn't think of anything that's have made that's not just a deck of cards, because that's pretty much what I focus on these days. Until Seize the Power comes out, so I'm very excited about Seize the Power. Speaking of which, anyway, but yes, compared to, let's say, No Thanks, which has, I think, 100 cards and a few plastic coins, is a roll and write inherently worse? Is a typical roll and write 100 pieces of paper with printing on it in the box with 2 dice and 2 pencils? Sure, like basically, is that inherently bad for the environment? Because this was a question posed in my Discord, and that's what I'm asking you. So while people ponder the answer, I will say over to you. What are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. Today, I'm going to be doing more drawing. So I didn't. Yeah, I ended up going out yesterday, but I have, in case you weren't here at the start of the show, here's the Yo-Yo Master. Here is the handstand person, which isn't actually that confusing because on the table it might look like that or like that, but it still looks pretty weird. It's like, what's going on there? What are it? Okay, I can see what's going on. And then, yep, this is a drummer, so like it's intentionally got little drumsticks to make it look like it kind of has 4 hands, potentially if you're just glancing, and the legs are together to maybe fool you into thinking it's a mermaid tail. Again, I don't want to actually fool anyone who spent, 2 seconds looking at it, but that's the thing in this game. Maybe you don't spend 2 seconds looking at it. And we've got the angry one who's just like a bit more off to the side, and we've got the that's all of them. 1, 2, yeah, that's all of them. And then we've got the ones from yesterday. I also like that T-shirt. I love love, and yeah, but yep, I'm going to continue doing drawing. I'm going to speak to Chris. We're going to try and I'm going to try and finish all those drawings in time for next week. So next Thursday, I can get it all sent off to Rob for a new printing of a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your radishes, black and white edition. I'm going to be making a Kickstarter update very soon, probably tonight, like telling people, hey, this is what I'm done. And Alex says, yeah, I think it has a pretty insignificant environmental impact, rolling rights. I like the handstand one. Glad you like it. Is drawing bad for the environment? That's something I touched upon earlier in the show. You missed it. And my conclusion is that yes, it is. But we need to, it has a fairly minor impact. And I go through lots of pens anyway, but I'm not going to repeat myself until I do the recap. But yeah, what are you up to? Let me know. I'm going to recap and wrap up before we finish up. So to recap, I have been drawing. I had some fun yesterday, gallivanting around, cycling around. I did some good exercise. I'm happy. Someone's looking at me saying, wow, you're doing a lot of exercise. Me, yes, I am, but only today. I mean, Saturday and Sunday, I basically stayed in this kind of home, in this small. I mean, for London, it's not small, but I stayed indoors all day, which is not great. But yes, I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to do more stuff. And so yes, I cycled about an hour and spent a long time. Like I spent a couple of hours kind of doing that, like doing squats and stuff. It was good stuff, like out in the park. And then I was listening to podcasts and yeah, good stuff. Has anyone done an environmental impact assessment on board games? I am not. I am not aware of someone who's done it who was clearly qualified to do it. Um, I just bought a second-hand bureau, says Alex. That sounds fantastic. Oh yes, Ian, who was doing sustainability, has another Twitter, sustainability. Yes, I should have Ian on the show. That's a good shout. Let me write a note somewhere. There we go. Yep. You see, I'm not going to show you what's on the other bits of paper, but this is a bit of paper that came in the post. I'm going to. There we go. So you see, you can see it's anyway. Raising paper. To ask on show, Ian Unmec. And we talked about cotton buds, we talked about the nappy thing in New York, we talked about D&D stuff, we talked about how digital stuff might actually have lots of impact in terms of server resources, which is the reason why Bitcoin and whatnot is not great. And we talked about, and we came to a general sentiment that it's probably, I think it's similar, maybe better if I compare, let's say, I'm trying to think of a typical roll and write, if there is such a thing. Let's say, Ganshon Clever. If I compare Ganshon Clever to No Thanks, I would say that they probably use a very similar amount of resources. And yeah, then the notion that you're going to go through all of that, sure, that's true, absolutely, but you do get enough paper to, and like when you look at Imperial Settlers roll and write, I was fully committed to doing all of it, but honestly, I was kind of finding it a bit dull, and yeah, I think Alex said, are you playing it because you want to play? Anyway, I just don't think it has more impact given the number of times it can be replayed. But that is it for today. I'm trying to do shorter shows, so still gone to 37 minutes. If you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez. My future streams on stuffbybez.com/streams. Tomorrow I will be having my quick 5-minute, maybe 10-minute catch up. Maybe I'll do it from inside the National Theatre. Maybe I'll start, a couple of minutes late, just so I can go into the National Theatre after they open, and then I can show you what it's like, the place where we playtest. Or maybe I'll do it from just outside, but that relies on me actually getting there on time. We'll see how I get on. Then Saturday, I'm talking about online sales, and basically ranting about me realizing that online stuff's more valuable. I decided that I'd start a new series about teaching games because I feel like teaching how to teach is a good thing. And also, I've got someone that I got in touch with, an amazing illustrator who might be coming in on Monday, Tuesday, and or Thursday next week. And of course, Jess Medringham is going to be the regular guest every fortnight, is going to be next Wednesday. What will we talk about? I don't know. Feel free to suggest a topic. Do I think that laminated sheets are more impactful? I do believe so. I think that generally people do not play it enough to offset the impact. That is my general belief. I believe that even 100, but again, this is where human intuition and the actual numbers might not align. And I would love to hear what Ian or someone else has to say about all of this stuff. So, yeah. But my opinion is that unless you're playing it 100 times, just use the sheets. 100 divided by the player count. So, unless you're playing it 25 times, just use the sheets, and that's okay. And yeah, the truth is, everything we do has an impact, by living, we have an impact on the world around us. Are Is us building homes good for the environment? No, of course it's not. But then homes are essential. And is entertainment essential? Uh, not really. But at the same time, a life without entertainment, I don't think personally would be a life worth living for me. I know that sounds really harsh and sad, but like in our human existence, the truth is that, um, yeah, in our existence, it's not just about trying to survive and trying to procreate. I don't feel a massive compulsion and urge to say, yay, I've managed to survive another day. Yay, I've managed to pass my genes on. I don't feel any compulsion to do that. And so I feel some compulsion, but I don't feel enough of a compulsion for it to make life worth living if I literally had no entertainment, without books, without and it's the same as clothing. Like, yeah, like clothing is it essential? It kind of is. I mean, we don't have enough hair to be able to, you know, not get really sick in the winter and probably have serious health problems if we walked around naked all the time. And so, yeah, we do need some degree of warm clothes, although some people, the way they dress in winter when it's snowing, wow. But yeah, like can think about reducing our impact, buying stuff that we actually reuse multiple times. But anyway, I feel like I've got to stop at this point. Share, spread the word. Thank you everyone for being here. And as much as I hate finishing, it's got to be done. Lots of love. And yes, see you at some points in the future. I am going to read this out. I've heard that the biggest environmental change we can do as individuals is lobbying for regulatory change. Stop flying and stop eating meat. Yes, I believe that as well. And I'm going to leave that up at the end because that's what appears on the Twitter thumbnail. It says, love you too. Types of entertainment could be changed to have less environmental impact. Yes, 100%. And so for now, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, Alex. Bye bye, Josie. Bye bye, everyone else. Lots of love. I like your wee pun. So I'm bringing back that. Bye bye.